dive into the wild, world-changing stories of the early church and ask all the questions you didn't know you had.
Hi, I'm Sharon Hobbs. I'm a teacher, a lover of all things scriptural, and I am so excited to have a conversation about Acts every week.
And I'm Melissa Phipps, here to ask all the dumb questions, the curious questions, and maybe the ones you were too afraid to ask in Sunday school.
Together, we'll explore the book of Acts, not as a dusty piece of history, but as a living, breathing story of God's power, his people, and his purposes.
So expect lively conversation, honest curiosity, and a few, wait, that's really in there moments.
This is, wait, that's in Acts, where discovery meets faith and theology meets real life.
Well, Sharon, today we're rejoining Peter on the steps of the Temple Mount to listen in on his fiery speech to the crowd.
Yes, I love this. We see Peter's personality, and I love that God uses our personality. You know, we're created for our purpose before we're ever born. Every characteristic, every talent, every skill, every ability we're given. You know, God made Peter to be an out there, out front, challenging kind of personality. And we see it come off right here at this very beginning. So
exciting. Well, how about I read a little bit here?
Absolutely.
Peter started out his sermon on the Temple Mount explaining kind of what was going on, all the excitement, all the unusual activity, and he explains it with Joel's prophecy. And then he continues with verse 22. Men of Israel, hear these words. Jesus of Nazareth, a man attested to you by God with mighty works and wonders and signs that God did through him in your midst, as you yourselves know. This Jesus, delivered up according to the definite plan and foreknowledge of God, you crucified and killed by the hands of lawless men. God raised him up, loosing the pangs of death, because it was not possible for him to be held by it.
Is there anything better in the word than those verses?
It's pretty powerful. It's pretty,
like I said,
in your face.
He is there challenging them. He didn't say, oh, somebody. He didn't even say, oh, the priests. He said, you.
Wow.
And honestly, isn't that the challenge he makes for us? We can't say, oh, Christ died for somebody else. No, Christ died for you. He died for me. I am the cause of his death, but I am also the goal of his death and resurrection.
Wow.
You are the goal of his resurrection. You, everybody out there, you are the goal of his resurrection.
Wow. Wow, that's intense.
Okay, so let's break it down.
Yes, sounds good.
All right, so first line.
Men of Israel, hear these words. Jesus of Nazareth, a man attested to you by God with mighty works and wonders.
Okay, I love this. I love this because we don't just have to take somebody's word for who Jesus is. He's attested to them. They saw the power. They saw the signs, wonders, and miracles. Now, here's the real challenge for all of us believers. In Mark, I think it's chapter 16, where it gives us one of the two complete statements about the our commission,
The Great
our
Commission.
purpose.
It says, go into all the world and proclaim the gospel to the whole creation. Whoever believes and is baptized will be saved, but whoever does not believe will be condemned. And these signs will accompany those who believe. In my name, they will cast out demons. They will speak in new tongues. They will pick up serpents with their hands. And if they drink any deadly poison, it will not hurt them. They will lay their hands on the sick and they will recover.
What does that sound like?
It sounds like what Jesus did.
It sounds like exactly the attesting of Jesus Christ as the Messiah. We are now his body on earth. We are now his representative. We are now him on the earth.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of a challenging statement for a lot of people. Not that we're, something, but we are vessels. We carry him, his spirit, the very same spirit that did all of the signs and wonders, all of the miracles, all of the things that confirmed who he was to all of those people. That same spirit lives in us. That is our call, our purpose, to represent him in ways that attest to the fact that he is alive and well and on the earth working through his people.
Wow. That's awesome. I was just thinking, as you were saying, we are him on earth. I was just thinking about my water bottle. When I'm like, oh, I need some water, I don't say I need a bottle. Right. I say I need water, and the water is inside the bottle.
Right.
So,
right. But you can't get the water, right?
Yeah.
You have to have something to hold on to. You have to have something that contains the water and releases the water. That's such a good analogy.
Wow.
I like that. I'm stealing that one, Melissa.
Okay. It's divine inspiration.
That's right.
So Jesus performed these miracles, and it says that God did through him in your midst, as you yourselves know. I'm also reminded too that they traveled. Jesus and his followers, they traveled many places in Israel and even across the sea to the Decapolis.
Down to Samaria as well. Yeah.
Yes. He really did make an effort to reach all of Israel.
That's right.
So that everyone could had an opportunity to see, or maybe just know someone who had that miracle happen to them.
I love the story of the woman at the well for several reasons. But one is she's not very well respected in town. We can kind of make that assumption because she's at the well
in the heat of the day.
She goes back and she becomes the evangelist for that city. Because, man, if there's somebody who can treat her good, a Jew that will receive her, we got to go see this guy. We got to go see what he's really about. And another thing is that he agreed and stayed and taught them for like 2 days in their town. Not just like pass through and talk to everybody out at the well. He must have stayed in somebody's house.
Yeah.
The Jew who didn't even want to touch or look at a Samaritan.
Yeah, that was the culture.
Here, he's accepting them. He's accepting their hospitality. He is valuing them. Oh, man, I could preach all day on that one.
That's so awesome. Okay. This Jesus delivered up according to the definite plan and foreknowledge of God.
All right. So we know that the Bible tells us Jesus was crucified from the foundations of the earth. The plan was already written, established, set before his birth, before earth was created, before the fall, because God, in his infinite knowledge, knew the failure of mankind. And he knew that he wasn't going to be satisfied with accepting that failure. He was going to create a plan to redeem man with their knowledge of good and evil. It's one thing to be Adam and Eve with only the knowledge of good, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's awesome to have never been tainted by sin, never know sin, that would have been an awesome thing. But to have fallen into sin, be destroyed, be brought to death, and then be redeemed. When I think I've been serving God just short of 50 years.
Wow.
And to this day, the most precious thing in my life is that he redeemed me and he continued all of these 50 years to keep me, to train me, to teach me, so that now I have the knowledge of evil. I do. And I choose the knowledge of good over and over and over because I know good. I know Jesus Christ, who is good. It makes me tear up every time I think about it.
Oh, God is so good, isn't he?
He is.
He is. Well, I love that his destiny was prearranged. He was on a divine mission. And it's Revelation 13:8 that you referenced, the fact that the lamb who was slain
Before the foundations of the earth.
Yeah.
That's right.
That's pretty astounding to think it was that long ago.
Yeah.
That was the plan all along.
Okay, so let's jump back. Let's connect the dots. Let's connect the fact that Jesus and his destiny, his purpose, everything written about his life was written before the foundations of the earth, right? We are his body, right?
Mm-hmm.
What applies to Jesus applies to us. Your life, your purpose, your call, your giftings, your talents, your abilities, your failures, all of it written in the books in heaven before you were ever born.
Wow.
So you, just like Jesus, had a calling, a purpose to fulfill on the earth. You have a calling, a purpose to fulfill on the earth. I have a calling and a purpose. We think of, I'm going to come to this day that then I'm going to be who I'm supposed to be. I'm going to fulfill what I'm supposed to fulfill. We need to look at Jesus Christ. His purpose, we just celebrated Christmas, right? Mm-hmm. His purpose in coming as an infant was just as an essential element of the story written about Jesus Christ. That story of his birth is an essential element. So his time when he was 12 and he went to the temple and he sat with the rabbis and the teachers, right? That was an essential element because line upon line, here a little, there a little, Jesus grew in favor with man and stature. That's what the word tells us, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
He came and he represented every stage of life. He walked through every kind of circumstance. He had loss. No doubt he loved his father, Joseph.
Sure.
We're not told the story of Joseph's death, but he had that loss, right?
Right.
He had the rejection of his brothers. I mean, everything that you have suffered, everything I have suffered, every circumstance that is known to man, Jesus was acquainted with grief and a man of sorrows, not just because of his end, but because he walked the human experience every step of the way through life, right?
Yeah.
But we are his living seed, his living examples, his living progeny, right? So we come and we walk the human experience because he walked the human experience. And he knows he is our comforter. He knows every circumstance that we go through, every loss, every gain, every joy, every sickness. You know, he did it all, right?
He sure did.
Yeah.
Sure did.
So I think we need to understand that, and then we'll walk in a way that says, you know, he knows me. He hasn't only read the book, he helped write the book because he is God, and God wrote the book for your life and my life. He wrote the book. So he knows. When you want to understand what the author wants to know or wants to tell you in a novel or a story, who are you going to ask? You're going to ask the author. Because the author had a very intentional understanding in his mind, how he wants you to read the story and receive the characters. So about our own lives, we need to talk to the author.
That's awesome. Well, continuing on, I feel like Peter was not only just pointing fingers at the crowd, but sticking it right in people's noses and says to them, "You crucified and killed by the hands of lawless men."
That's right. He challenges them. And is that not what the gospel is supposed to do? Because, see, when you start looking at this few verses right here is the statement of the gospel.
Really? I have it wrote down a little bit farther in verse 38. That was the first gospel. So help me figure that out.
Okay. What is the gospel?
Well, from our first episode, or one of our first episodes, we talked about the gospel being the message of Christ's life, death, burial, and resurrection.
Okay. So what did we just read? Peter's challenge.
Yeah.
He lived.
Yeah.
He's testified to you by the signs and wonders and his ministry that you saw.
Yeah.
You killed him, right?
Yep.
And, you know, if you killed him, they all knew that they buried him. And yet, the very next line is going to tell us the end of the gospel.
Yep. God raised him up, loosing the pangs of death, because it was not possible for him to be held by.
That's right. Resurrection.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the gospel. But verse 38, read that again.
38, repent and be baptized, every one of you, in the name of Jesus Christ.
Okay. That's our response to the gospel.
Gotcha.
So,
well, that makes more sense.
Yeah. I mean, really, what good is the gospel if we don't respond to it?
Right.
You know,
right.
Knowing the gospel doesn't get you there. Know that Jesus lived, died, was resurrected has no effect on your eternal result unless you apply the gospel to your life.
That's true. There's a lot of people, and even the devil knows that all of this thing transpired, and he has not chosen Jesus.
That's exactly right.
Wow. So I have a question about Peter. Like, we see Peter here getting pretty fired up and straight up accusing people, rightly accusing, like calling them out that this is what you have done.
That's right.
Is this typical Peter? Has he always been this confident in either his preaching or his life, or where's
so it's very interesting. Jumping back, of course, into the idea that our book is written, right? Our characteristics are written. Characteristics tend to have two sides of a coin. Okay.
Okay.
So our characteristics can be very beneficial to us, right? I'll use my husband as an example.
Okay.
My husband is very stubborn. If he sets his mind about a thing, you cannot move him off of that point. That can be a very beneficial quality. It can also be a very challenging quality.
I understand that.
So that's Peter. Peter has the quality of, we see impetuousness way back when he was like, oh, all right, if that ghost is really you, Jesus, you tell me to get out of the boat and walk on the water because you're walking on the water, you know? I mean, would you be that impetuous?
I probably would not be, no.
I'd like to think I would be because I'm kind of that impetuous kind of person. And yet, impetuous people also, the backside of that is being afraid, being worried about what people might think or do. It's like impetuousness is connected to confidence. Confidence has a boldness. Peter could be bold. He could be impetuous because he had a whole book of proven power of Jesus Christ, right? And Jesus had pulled him out of a couple of things previously. So he kind of knew Jesus had his back, right? But what happens when the one that's got your back isn't there to have your back?
Yeah. That's
So-
a little unnerving.
Yes. So Peter denied Jesus 3 times,
Yeah, he
right?
did.
Because Jesus was, instead of standing there having his back, he was there in front of him looking like he was no longer powerful because he yielded his power, did not use his power in that setup, right? He didn't show his strength. So Peter is afraid and responds in fear with denial, right? Peter stays afraid until Jesus shows up again. When Jesus shows up again, Peter starts to go, oh, he's back. Oh, he can still have my back, And so then we see Peter stepping into his call. His call really was to be the bold one. His call was to be the lead apostle in the Jewish part of the church.
Wow. That's awesome. Let's continue on then with the quote that Peter gives. It's from Psalm 16, 8 through 11. We'll just read the part that's here. It says, I saw the Lord always before me, for he is at my right hand, that I may not be shaken. Therefore my heart was glad and my tongue rejoiced. My flesh also will dwell in hope. For you will not abandon my soul to Hades, or let your Holy One see corruption. You have made known to me the paths of life. You will make me full of gladness with your presence.
Okay, so who wrote that?
David.
Right. We know David wrote most of the Psalms, right? So Peter begins, and you will see the Jews almost always, and we see it later shortly in Stephen's famous preaching to the Jews when he was the first martyr, right?
Right.
We see that they always go back to their history. The Jewish history was the foundation of their belief, their faith, right? If it didn't connect to their history, it didn't connect to them today. We live kind of a life cut off from our histories, right?
Yeah, that's true.
I know very few stories. I know a few stories from my mom and dad. I know almost no stories from my grandparents. And beyond that, I know nothing of the history of my people, right? But they rehearsed. In fact, they had laws. Tell your children, tell your grandchildren. They repeated their history, and even their celebrations. We do a Passover dinner at church, and almost the whole Passover dinner is a retelling of their history, of their stories, of their essential things, right? So for Peter to preach here effectively to these people, he had to connect it to their history. They had two magnificent, great characters in their history that they always went back to. Who were those two?
I would guess Moses and David.
I would guess you're right.
Good job, Melissa.
That's right. If it went back to Moses or David, then it had an anchor in their faith, right? So Peter here is anchoring them into their history, into their faith, right? David was an incredible king, right? The promise was that from David, the Messiah was going to come, right?
Yeah.
So the David connection was super important. What are they? Remember, we've talked about it. They are under Roman oppression.
Right.
What did they want?
And they wanted out from under Roman
That's
oppression.
right. And they wanted their kingdom to come, their king that was promised to take the throne of David and rule from Jerusalem. That's what they wanted, right?
Yes.
So he's connecting back. What's a good preacher do? A good preacher connects with his audience. He meets them where they're at.
Right.
So he is meeting them where they're at, bringing up David. But the interesting thing is, when he says this, he reminds them that David is dead.
Oh.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
The interesting thing, what's this feast? The Feast of
This is Pentecost. Yes.
Okay. If you've ever watched Fiddler on the Roof, tradition is very important to the Jews. One of their traditions was when they came to Jerusalem to celebrate the Feast of Pentecost, every feast had their own individual traditions, right? So at the Feast of Pentecost, one of their traditions was to visit the tomb of David. The tomb of David was located in the city of Zion. And where's the city of Zion?
Jerusalem.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the Temple Mount, actually.
Wow.
Is part of the city of Zion, right? So the tomb of David was very near to the temple, which is where they're at preaching, right? And so Peter can assume that, they probably, at least some of them, if they haven't already been to the tomb of David, they're going to go later today.
Right.
Right? They have been to the tomb of David. So he's reminding them the tomb of David is not open. The rock was not rolled back. He didn't raise. He did see corruption. The interesting thing, if you know Jewish history, the way that they buried their people is that they would put them in a cave or in a place that, that had ledges, right? And they would carry that body in there and they would let it decay.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
Then what happened?
Well, once it was just the bones left, then they would move them to a permanent burial site.
Right. They actually put them in what's called ossuaries.
Okay.
Stone jars. They collected their bones and put them in that stone jar. And maybe, probably in David's case, that stone jar with his bones were still in that same burial chamber, right? But that burial chamber probably had many different bodies put in there, decayed, and then collected in ossuaries and stored in the chamber, right?
Wow. Yeah.
So they knew by their history, by their methods of burial, right? They knew. In fact, think about this. When Joseph was in Egypt, what did he instruct? He knew that there was a promise that at some time, all of these Jews are going to leave Egypt and they're going to go back to Israel, right? 400 years,
Right.
but nonetheless, they were going to go
Yes.
back. What was, when Joseph died, what was his request?
Yeah. He wanted his bones returned.
Take my bones
Yeah.
back to Israel. Because,
Yes.
see, that was their history. They, that wasn't Egyptian history.
True.
Egyptian history was you put them in
The
a
sarcophagus.
Yes, a sarcophagus. And they embalmed them. It
Yeah.
was a whole different story.
That's right.
But he knew that his bones were going to get carried back just like all of his ancestors and all ancestors forward from that time. Their bones were collected into ossuaries. And so they knew that David saw corruption,
Right.
right?
Because they saw his bones.
But this is a prophetic, all of the prophecies of Jesus Christ. This is a prophetic declaration that there will be one, and he will be the Lord. That's what David says. My Lord. This is my Lord. My Lord is not going to see corruption. Well, what's going to happen then? He was raised up on the third day,
Yeah.
right?
That's pretty awesome. Okay, so I guess we'll stop there and we will rejoin Peter's sermon on the Temple Mount in our next episode.
Okay. Oh, it was so much fun. Hey, everyone. We so appreciate you joining us at the table of the Lord, the place where we can eat from his word. And we invite you to share it, make comments.
Well, that wraps up today's episode of Wait, That's an Acts, where I ask the questions and Sharon brings the theology.
And together we uncover just how wild, surprising, and inspiring the book of Acts really is.
If you learned something new, laughed a little, or had one of those, wait, that's in there moments, share this episode with a friend.
And you can find more conversation, notes, and upcoming topics wherever you get your podcasts.
Until next time.
Keep asking questions. Keep discovering the God who is better than you imagine.